Hello and welcome to the home of the Ghost Owl. And yes, it's Monday. Warhammer Community is back with another Warhammer The Old World article as part of their Old World Almanac. And today it's all about morale and psychology. So let's have a look and see what the article says. Okay, so a battlefield, no matter what the average bestigor might claim, is not a happy place to be in the old world. What with marauding bands of bickering orcs, frenzied chaos warriors bearing the gifts of the gods, and terrifying dragons, both living and dead, all rampaging around the domains of man, this is not a good place to be a lowly imperial trooper waggling a halberd. Okay, so what have we got? So we're on our way to discuss morale and psychology work in Warhammer The Old World. Right, morale. Last week we discussed the nitty-gritty of combat, seeing what happens once the spittle-flecked Chaos Warrior crashes into the ever-so-slightly quivering spear you're holding. Okay, right. It's quite rare for a round of melee to end in a draw, and where there's a loser, there are consequences. The first of these is the break test. Right, a leadership role modified by how badly you lost the combat with 3 outcomes, and we saw these last time: break and flee, fall back in good order, and give ground. Right, so here's a break test example. So we saw this last time, right? This is the unit of Swordmasters, and we talked about how that works. So we saw that last time, so if you want to see more about that, check out the last video. Right. In the first case, the losing unit turns and runs in the opposite direction from whatever caused it to flee, and whichever enemy unit had the stronger unit strength if it was a multiple combat. Okay, right. So it runs in the direction away from the unit that has the strongest unit strength. Okay, if you're in a multiple combat, right. They run 2d6 inches, pivoting only to avoid impassable terrain. So it's basically a straight line as if you can. And if any part of the fleeing unit crosses a battlefield edge, it is destroyed. Okay, that's normal. If the enemy gives chase and rolls high enough on 2d6 to make contact, the fleeing unit is destroyed. And this is where you could see the bonus of the return of cavalry, because you might well expect, and certainly in the past, the cavalry would roll 3d6 to make contact as opposed to just the 2d6 because they've got a higher move. So that's where we could see cavalry, as if you've been watching my faction focus videos, 8th edition cavalry weren't that effective because it was very difficult to break a unit. Here could be quite interesting. Right, if they run through another enemy unit, they take additional wounds as they go. Right, so if they run through an enemy unit, they take wounds, but they're not immediately destroyed. That's good. And if they run through a friendly unit, however, they're safe, but that unit may now bear the brunt of the pursuer's charge. In short, try not to break and flee. Okay, so you can run through friendly units, which is also nice. Okay, good. On the other hand, a unit that falls back in good order is still beating a hasty retreat, but they've not yet lost that fighting spirit. They can discard the lower of the 2 dice when they flee, and they automatically rally and reform at the end. Okay, so if you fall back in good order, you roll the 2 dice, you discard the lower of the 2 dice, and then you automatically rally and reform at the end, ready to receive the charge of their pursuer hit back in the next turn. That's quite interesting. Okay, that's good. So you could get some distance. I mean, you can get up to 6 inches there doing that if you get lucky. Right, giving ground is the best result when losing a combat. The loser simply steps back 2 inches, terrain permitting, attempting to put some much-needed space between them and the foe, unless, of course, the winner chooses to follow up and press their advantage, in which case combat continues next turn. Okay, so that's an interesting one. If you charge, you lose the combat. You give ground, you move back 2 inches. The opponent then charges you, so they get the bonus of charging you. If they've charged you and you lose the combat and give ground, it gives you the chance to charge them next turn. So in initiative terms, if you get your charge bonus on initiative, that could help. So it doesn't really help if you charge and lose. But if they charge you, it gives you the opportunity to charge them back rather than being locked in combat the next turn. Okay. Running away isn't the only thing on the minds of rank and file. There's a whole world of psychology. Okay, this is going to be interesting. Right. All the psychological effects are back. So fear, terror, stupidity, animosity, frenzy, unbreakable, stubborn, and hatred. Now, certainly fear didn't have the best results in 8th edition, but it looks like maybe we will see how they perform now. Okay, while in previous games, psychology was separate from the rest of the universal special rules, it's all now found in one place in the core rulebook. Okay, great. So we're back to unique special rules. We'll be looking at other unique special rules in a future almanac, but there's time this week to see how a few of these work. Okay, great to see Games Workshop using a lot of the old artwork as well. That's really cool. Right, units causing fear, for instance, will have enemies quaking in their boots. Think skeleton warriors, basically anything undead normally causes at least fear. If an enemy with a lower unit strength wishes to charge a fear-causing unit, it must first take a leadership test, or its charge will fail. That's pretty cool. Already in combat with a scary regiment of skeleton warriors, take a leadership test each round or suffer -1 to hit. So this is where things in the past where you a spell that modifies leadership's not that great, but in terms of, in an undead army or a Tomb King's army, let's say, if you could modify the leadership and get them to fail, the -1 to hit could help keep those skeletons alive, and certainly with some replenishment as well, they'd make a reasonable tar pit. Right, terror is even worse. Okay, if you're charged by a beast with this effect, you have to take a leadership test just to be able to clear a charge reaction. So that can make monsters pretty good, as opposed to, you charge in the monster and you get shot to pieces before you even get there. So you've got to take the leadership test just to do the charge reaction. If you fail, you flee. And that's before dice are rolled to see if the charge succeeds. So you take the terror test even before the charge succeeds. So you could just flee just by declaring a charge. Okay. Terror also applies an extra -1 penalty to opposing units' leadership characteristic when taking break tests, making a break and flee outcome that much more likely. Well, that's definitely going to help. You've got these big Death Star blocks. It was always, the issue with monsters, particularly in the 8th edition with things like Steadfast, is you just couldn't break the damn things. But an extra -1 to the leadership, so even if you win the combat, you've got a good chance of making them fail their leadership test. Okay, and they've given us a card, a unit card for a Dragon Ogre Shaggoth. Now, is this from the past or is this new? Well, it just so happens I have my Warriors of Chaos 8th edition army book in front of me. So when we take a look at the stats, everything appears to be the same, except ballistic skill here is 2, and in the army book it was 3. So they've reduced its ballistic skill by 1. Everything else is identical. So it's an identical stat line to 8th edition, except the ballistic skill is reduced by 1. But the special rules are completely different. So we've got Armor Bane. I guess you're kind of expecting that's going to give an additional -2 to your armor piercing, essentially, or your rend, whatever you want to call it. So you get additional. That's I guess. Armored hide 2. So he used to have scaly skin 5+. So does this mean he gets +2 to his save, which would essentially give him scaly skin 5+, or does he get an armor save of 2+? It doesn't say 2+, it just says 2. So it kind of makes me feel like he's getting +2 to his save, which would give him that scaly skin 5+ that we saw in the past. Close order. Okay. Ensorcelled weapons. That's obviously going to be stuff we're going to cover later. That wasn't in the previous rules. Immune to psychology was. Large target, that was. So large target in the past meant you couldn't claim cover for these large units. Stomp attacks D3+1. So it looks like maybe we're not getting the stomp as part of just being a monster. That's actually in the rules. So it's D3+1. So that whole war stomp thing that they had, that the monsters had in the 8th. Right, we've got Storm Call. We don't know what that is, but just as an example, In the previous Dragon Ogre Shaggoth had a rule called Storm Rage, and that basically gave him a 2+ ward save against all lightning-based attacks, such as Chain Lightning, Uranus Thunderbolt, Warp Lightning, Storm of Shemtek, and stuff like that. Also, 2+ ward save against Skaven Warp Lightning Cannons, Skaven Doom Wheels, Kolek Sun Eater's Lord of the Storm attack, and all that sort of stuff. So, and if he's ever hit by a lightning-based attack or effect, they immediately gain the Frenzy special rule. So is Storm Call the same as Storm Rage? Don't know, but they sound reasonably similar, and it's lightning-based, so it could be quite interesting. Anyway, causes terror. We talked about terror above, and so did the one in the 8th edition book. Okay, right, well then you've got the Quickening Storm. That's not in the book. I've no idea at the moment what that is. Even if we look at Kolek, do we have anything for Kolek for that? No, he's got Lord of the Storm. Lord of the Storm was essentially a shooting phase within 24 inches. On a roll of a 2 to 6, a bolt of lightning hits the unit with D6 strength 6 hits. On a roll of 1, the lightning hits Kolek. He can use it even if he's in close combat. So, but of course he has the same rule, which is the Storm Rage rule, so he'd have a 2+ ward save against that, rolling a 1, and it would make him frenzied. So pretty nice either way. Is Lord of the Storm the same as Quickening Storm? Who knows? The names are different, so is the Storm Call. But just to give us an indication that this looks pretty similar to an 8th edition, but there's a lot more special rules in here with Armor Bane, Armoured Hide, Close Order, and all that sort of stuff is all fairly new. But there's the stat line itself is pretty similar, minus that ballistic skill. Okay, finally we can touch on Frenzy. Frenzy's pretty cool. You know, Khorne Warriors have Frenzy, for example. So this gives models in a unit an extra attack and also immunity from fear and terror. A frenzied unit, however, must always charge if able to and can never choose to flee from a charge. And if you want to see what other units might have frenzy, we've got a whole bunch of faction focus videos based upon 8th edition army books, and you can see which units in those books back in 8th edition had frenzy. There's a good chance that the bulk of them will probably have frenzy in Warhammer The Old World as well. So but yeah, no surprises there. The extra attack, the immunity to fear and terror, and then they must always charge and can't flee. Absolutely as expected for Frenzy. We've got a dark magic spell here. So interesting, we're starting to see a bit more about the different laws of magic in the game. This is a dark magic one. Rage builds within those near the dark mage, filling them with a terrible lust for bloodshed. So it's an enchantment, casting value of 9, range is 12, so not that much. This is going to be interesting to say. We still don't know what's happening with the whole casting value, pools of dice, that sort of thing. But essentially, you can give the friendly unit frenzy and hatred all enemies. So we still don't know what hatred does as yet. That was essentially re-rolls. But okay, so that's the psychology. It says, next week we'll click our fingers and an entire article on magic will miraculously appear before our eyes. Great. So magic, that's a big one. I know a lot of people are concerned about magic, you know, how it's been in the past, how it might be in the future. No magic phase. So magic article, really looking forward to. This morale article, I mean, it was nice to see a Dragon Ogre Shaggoth sort of unit card. So there's some things in there. Overall, nothing in this is majorly surprising. To be honest, the biggest news is really in the fall back in good order, the give ground. We now know what that is. So we now know what fleeing looks like. We know what falling back in good order looks like. And we know what giving ground looks like. So that's pretty nice. The psychology stuff all looks pretty straightforward from what I can see. Nothing that's majorly different or game breaking or complete shot in the dark from what we would have seen in the past. Overall, decent article. Like I say, really nice to see a unit card, and looking forward to seeing the Magic article next week. And I say, loving the use of the older artwork. And there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is it for this article. As always, we're trying to stick to the facts. We're not trying to jump to any conclusions. We're just trying to look at the facts as they're presented, trying to ascertain how that particular rule works. And as always, these rules need to be taken all together to see how they're going to perform on the tabletop. So, before we make big judgments on is this terrible, is this amazing, we don't know yet until we actually play the game. But as I've said in the previous articles, and this article maintains, that there's nothing I've seen to date which is game-breakingly bad for me personally, and overall I'm very positive about what I've read, and I'm looking forward to playing a few games when it's released, and seeing how it actually plays out in the tabletop. Magic, though, next week, that's going to be a big one. It's a key part of the game. It can be game breaking, so we'll be really interested to see how that pans out. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't though, give it a thumbs down and let me know why in the comments down below. If you don't tell me why you didn't like it, I can't change it and I can't improve for the future, and I want to make my content better for everybody out there. And as always, please hit that subscribe button. It's totally free for you to do. It's a huge deal for me, so thank you for that in advance. You've been watching The Ghost Owl. Tune back in for some more Old World content. There's plenty of Old World content coming out right now, and we'll also be back for the article next Monday.